Hi, it's me, Rasheed Ogunlaru, coach, speaker, and author. I just want to wish you all the best for this time, this season, this time of the year. And as you're planning for it, here are my top 10 tips for surviving and thriving during the Christmas period. This, of course, is a very special time. It is a very, very significant time. For some, it's a deeply spiritual time. For some, it's a family time. For some, it's a time for reflection, for introspection. And for many, it's a combination of all of these things, but it can also be a time that can be a time of a great deal of stress, of pressure. It is a time that is deeply commercial, and it can bring all sorts of challenges for those people, especially those people who feel isolated and vulnerable. So you've got this whole minestrone soup of different emotions that can be going on. And that's why many people find it very, very difficult. Let's not also forget that it is a time of the year where the weather begins to change, we head into winter, and so it's a time that for many, many people, surviving the season and moving ahead into the next season can be very, very challenging, especially for those people who are very, very alone and very, very vulnerable. So my tips here are just to help you to get the best out of the season. Whoever you are, whether you are, whatever you are, wherever you are, whatever is really important to you, whatever lens that you look at this season through. So here are my top 10 tips. Number one, set a budget that you can afford and stick to it. Set a budget that you can afford and stick to it. There's no point getting into debt for the whole year ahead for basically what is essentially one day. So if that means that you need to set a gifts amnesty where this year you don't buy gifts, or that you just buy gifts for the smallest kids, or that you'll just buy each other one present, then do that. Set a budget that you can afford and stick to it. So that's our tip number one. Tip number two is all about food and drink. So tip number two is know your limits and stick to it. Again, there is no point piling all the pounds on for one day that it's going to take you several months for you to work off. Really be mindful about food and drink. Know your limits. When it comes to food, know that most of that food you could probably have an extra helping later or tomorrow, a couple of days on. There's no point of paying that particular price. The same thing with drink. Really do know your limits. There's no point getting involved in having all sorts of struggles, the hangovers, or embarrassing yourself for that one day. So food and drink, know your limits. Number two. Tip number three, peace and goodwill. Now this taps in. Remember that it is a time of peace and goodwill. So avoid the arguments, avoid the old family feuds, avoid those battles, avoid giving people a piece of your mind at the parties and so on. It's a time of peace and goodwill. It might be that ideal opportunity to move forward and to come to peace personally and a place of progress. So that's tip number three. Tip number four, celebrate. Party, yes, but be safe and be sensible. So party, celebrate, but be safe. So keep an eye on yourself. Be mindful about how it is you're going to travel from A to B, and keep an eye out for those other people who also might be vulnerable. So again, be safe when you're out there partying. Celebrate, but know your limits. Again, know what works for you. Be sensible. Have a plan. Think about your travel situation. Keep an eye out for yourself and for others. Tip number five: plan. And that's what we're doing here. Plan who and where you're going to spend some time with. So that planning is probably also going to require that you're going to need to do some preparing. There might be all sorts of different things depending on your circumstances, from some gifts that you might want to buy to who you're wanting to spend the time with. And it's like who you want to spend the time with and where you're going to want to be, that often it can be very, very good for you to spend some time planning. So plan what's going to work for you. Don't overload your schedule. Plan in a way that's going to work for you. Then that leads us to tip number 6, which is essential: communicate. Communication is the breath or death of every relationship. So communicate early on if you can with people where you're going to be spending your time. Give people time to get used to it, if need be, to get over it, and to be mindful about it. So communicate, but communicate from the heart in a compassionate and kind way. Tip number 7 is all about no stress. Don't overstretch. So with this planning and with what you're going to be doing, Don't overstretch yourself. There's no point in putting yourself through that stress of overstretching. So really be mindful in terms of your schedule. And that means not just at the planning stage, but actually as you're going through the season, just spot where it is that you might need to just have that time out. Tip number 8, relax and recharge. Sometimes there can be so much going on in the run-up and during the days itself, and if you've got lots of travelling around, and if you've got lots of logistics and so on, it can turn into work. Remember, what's key at this time of the year, it's one of the few times where you can actually relax and recharge. So put in that time for you to rest, relax, recharge. If you know you just need a nap, do it. If you know that you need to go for that really mindful walk where you can just soak it all up and appreciate, then that's really important. And that also ties in with, as well as relaxing and charge, you've got an opportunity to really reflect and really soak up the richness and the learning from the year. Tip number 9, fun, family and friends. Remember that that's really what's at the heart of this season. And for some people, they would add the 4th F there, which is about faith. So fun, family, friends, and your own faith or your own sense of purpose and why it is that we're here. Don't get too caught up in all the other noise. Bear that in mind and keep in mind, be mindful about those people who may not have those kind of things. So spare a thought. Perhaps you might want to spare a little bit of time or just be there, or you might want to give a phone call or knock on the door of somebody who perhaps you know who could value from it and who could value from a little bit of your time. Number 10, finally, silent night. Sleep. It might be one of the few times that you really get to have some really wonderful peace and time to really relax and recharge. We tend to often have busy lives and busy minds, so make sure you get that sleep you need. This time of the year can be a wonderful time to reboot, to recharge, to re-energize, so make sure that you really enjoy that sleep and don't feel guilty about that lying. Give yourself that time. So, top 10 tips again, very, very briefly. Set a budget you can afford and stick to it. Food and drink, know your limits. Peace and goodwill, bury the hatchets, avoid the arguments. Tip number 4, celebrate, party yes, but be safe. Tip number 5, plan your time, where you're going to be. Tip number 6, communicate. Remember, communication is the breath or the death of any relationship, and communicate kindly and compassionately. Tip number 7, no stress, don't overstretch yourself and go for a walk when you need to. Tip number 8, rest, relax, recharge. Tip number 9, fun, family, friends and faith. Keep everything in perspective. Tip number 10, silent night, getting that sleep that you need. I want to wish you all the best for the season ahead. Take good care, lots of love. Hope to see you in the new year. Bye-bye.